Hello and welcome to yet another link here on Press TV with me, Zubin Zarvan, where, guess what, we're discussing Israel, its actions and reactions vis-a-vis what's happening throughout the Maghreb, that is North African region in terms of revolutions, if not the broader Middle East. And to do that, we've got some people as audience joining us in Beirut as well as London. And some experts on the panel. In London, we have Osama Kashu. He's the leader of the International Solidarity Movement, or ISM. In Ontario, London, that is, Canada, we've got Edward Corrigan. Well, he is basically an international immigration lawyer. And in Gaza joining us, we've got Eddie Mormick. He's a human rights activist. And finally, from New York City, we've got Thomas Lipscomb, an investigative journalist, fellow at the Annenberg University. A warm welcome to everyone. Let me begin with you, Osama. I think it was a couple of weeks or maybe even days ago that the Director General of Israel's Ministry for Strategic Affairs, by the name Yossi Cooperwasser, said something along the lines that, well, it was actually a question I'd like you to answer. Are these revolutions that we're witnessing throughout the region, Middle East as well as Maghreb, democracy movements, democratization, if not modernization revolutions, or simply nationalistic ones?
Well, I think, to start with, I don't really like leaders, so I'm not a leader of the International Solidarity Movement. I'm just a member, and I was one of the founders of that movement. And this movement is an international movement which addresses revolution before anything else. And we believe that democracy is the greatest revolution ever that we witnessed. And yes, by all means, all these people who are calling for their rights to be acknowledged and for their full freedom are calling for their democracy, and their revolution is a complete right. And I don't think it's up to any Israeli officials to identify what is their movements. Is it like a democracy or revolution? It's the people who are saying basically what they're doing, and we are seeing on the TVs.
But apart from those definitions and whether or not they have any right to define those things, let me go to Gaza and to Eddie Mormick. Now, Eddie, what have been the reactions, if not actions, of the Israeli camp vis-a-vis these events in the region?
They've kept very quiet. There has been a few bombings in Gaza, and we felt the full effects as they shuddered around the Zaytun area near the eastern Gaza Strip. I think they're waiting and they're biding their time. Some people are saying that Israel is going to strike now Gaza because it is, while there's still unstable regimes, while perhaps they might be expecting people to be less friendly to them than, for example, Hosni Mubarak was, who was a massive ally with Israel and obviously a big benefactor of US aid. So now that they fear in the future they might not have this ally, people are talking about them striking or doing something which could have more permanent effects on the Palestinian situation, perhaps in the West Bank, talking about transfer like Lieberman has been doing in the past. There's been no change in the siege, even from the Egyptian side as well. There has been nothing. It's still continuing 3.5 years now. It's totally illegal, against collective punishment, against the Geneva Convention, Article 33.
This is delve deeper in the internal situation in Gaza, no doubt about it, a little bit down the road. But to the people in Beirut, now, why don't you guys tell us, in your mind, do you think the Israelis are somewhat afraid, if not concerned, about what's happening throughout the region in terms of these popular uprisings, which aren't necessarily, by the way, called Islamic, but there might be indeed an Islamic component to them?
No, what Israel afraid most, everybody knows about Israel massacres for 60 years. We don't need to speak about them a lot. Now, what Palestinian needs are, in my opinion, they don't need too much talking. They need only weapons. They need only weapons.
Are you?
I think only for $100 million.
Sir, in Beirut, are you suggesting more violence, or am I mistaken here? Are you alluding to the fact that in order to respond commensurately to the Israeli, let's say, actions upon the people in the occupied territories, specifically Gaza, there should be military retaliation, a forceful and vehement one?
Of course. Israel, if you are weak and you speak with Israel in a weak way, they will not respect you. If the only way for 60 years, Palestinians are like without real weapons. They need real weapons, not only machine guns.
But sir, again, since you brought it up, it is indeed a very important issue. And I'm sure a lot of people in the audience, as well as experts, might want to weigh in here. Now, is weaponry the best of tools in terms of striking a healthy and constructive dialogue? Because unless you do actually have that health of a dialogue, no matter how lopsided it could be in the end of the day, there will not be any constructive outcome. There would be just, this vicious cycle of violence upon violence.
Look, the Palestinians doesn't need war jet planes. They don't need submarines. They don't need nuclear bombs. Only they need like missiles, starting from Katyusha missiles and like Cornet against the war tanks. Then it doesn't cost a lot.
So you're saying that they need weaponry to equip themselves and properly defend themselves against Israeli attacks. But then, is there not a better way? I'm addressing this to someone else in the audience in Beirut. Another way, a more appropriate, more acceptable, humanistic way, even effective way to respond to those Israeli attacks that do happen on a daily basis on the people in the occupied territories, specifically in Gaza?
Definitely not, because Israel, the only way for them to understand is by violence. Well, violence, not violence really, is just to defend ourselves, because the say of what's taken by power, it has to be brought back by power. See, Israel has been systematically killing, ethnically cleansing, trying to get rid of all the Palestinian in the occupied territories, and of course in the Middle East, whether it was Lebanon or maybe now in the future Egypt. So the only way for Israel to understand is by fighting it back, because there's no dialogue. What the dialogue has been happening since the Oslo, and what the Palestinian authorities has been talking to them for so many years. What happened with that? Nothing whatsoever. Israeli and the Zionists in particular, the only way to understand, for them to understand, is by fighting them back. And of course, Gaza needs more weapon to fight them back, and I'm with that 100%.
To Edward Corrigan. Now, what's your perspective, being a lawyer? How legalistic an argument do you think this is for the Palestinian, those underprivileged and under constant attack and the threat by the Israeli side to take up arms in order to defend themselves? Do you find that illegal?
Well, every people has a right to defend themselves, so certainly the Palestinians, and this is an established fact and recognized under international law. But you have to look at the realities. Israel is considered the fourth most powerful state militarily. The Palestinians can never compete with that, and the United States, as long as it doesn't change its policy, is going to make sure that Israel has a military superiority over not only the Palestinians, but all over any coalition of Arab states. And actually, Israel's talking about a $20 billion budget request from the United States next year because of the change of circumstances. Certainly what's happening in Egypt. Lebanon has stood up and defended itself very well, and has, in fact, by basically having a tie, has in effect defeated the Israeli army. But the Palestinians, I think, have to continue their peaceful that. And there's this image of that Israel is the David and somehow the Arabs are the Goliath is I think is gone. It's clearly that the Palestinians are the disadvantaged party. They are now the Davids fighting a Goliath that is imposing repressive policies, and the occupied territories essentially has Gaza under a siege and starving it, which is clearly contrary to international law. I think what Israel is obsessed about is the demographic issue, where right now according to various sources, either the Palestinians are tied with the Israelis between the Jordan and the Mediterranean, or in fact there's more Palestinians between the Jordan and Mediterranean. Therefore, they're trying to create conditions to drive out the Palestinians from the West Bank, also from Israel proper. So this seems to be one of the obsessions of the Israeli policymakers. But I think, the reality is that the Palestinians are not going to get nuclear weapons, they're not going to get F-16s. It would be, I suppose, helpful if they had some anti-aircraft weapons or surface-to-air missiles that they could defend themselves against the helicopter attacks and the fighter attacks. But this is not going to happen.
Okay, now speaking of this, potential scenario in which the Palestinians would be empowered to properly defend themselves against a more superior, militarily speaking, financially speaking, Israeli side, but until we do actually establish whether or not this is, well, possible, if not acceptable. But then let me go to the people in London and, retrace the conversation a little bit to the first step where we got started. Now, do you think the Israelis are a little bit fearful of what's happening across the region, the Middle East region, broader Middle East, as well as North Africa, in terms of these democracy and liberation movements?
Well, of course, they must be afraid, because now they are afraid of Islamic Brotherhood, for example, in Egypt, taking part of the political organization, which could harm them somehow in terms of their peace treaty with Egypt. And this is the Egyptian part of it. And throughout the Middle East, of course, there is anxious anxiety from the foes, from the Israeli and from the Middle Eastern.
Simply put it, yes, the Israelis should be concerned, because they've made pact with these regimes who are, in essence, dictators. And what they've done is kind of separated the Palestinians and the surrounding countries, because these countries don't actually support their regimes. Now, as these regimes fall, the Israelis are obviously going to be concerned, yes.
Let me go to Thomas Lipscomb. Welcome to the show, Mr. Lipscomb. I don't know if you were listening to what we were discussing so far. If you were, good for you. But anyway, just answer a brief question for the starters, maybe. Do you think Israel is, or should, or even might, or would be a little bit concerned about what's taking place throughout the region?